Did you know that the crucifixion of Jesus could have been the beginning of something far worse? It's an event most of us are familiar with, yet few truly reflect on what was at stake in that moment. According to the Bible, when Jesus was crucified, the entire heavens watched in reverent silence. It wasn't just the disciples or the Roman soldiers who were present. The entire celestial realm was attentive, expectant, waiting to see what would happen. What many don't realize is that all the angels were ready to intervene. These celestial beings, whose strength and power are incomprehensible to us, weren't there merely as spectators. They were prepared, waiting for a single word from Jesus. One plea would have been enough to unleash all the power of heaven upon the earth. Yet Jesus chose silence. Picture it, thousands of angels aligned like an invincible army, watching every second of that heartbreaking scene. These angels were not just ethereal figures, they were heavenly warriors, beings with an unimaginable capacity for destruction. It is said they were ready to act, awaiting only a command. Everything hung in the balance. The tension was palpable, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. The Bible recounts that a single angel has the power to destroy more than 185,000 men in one night. This isn't an exaggeration. In 2 Kings 19 verse 35, we read how an angel of the Lord wiped out an entire Assyrian army in a matter of hours. If one angel could do that, imagine what thousands of them could have done at Golgotha. The fate of humanity hung by a thread, entirely dependent on Jesus' decision. It's estimated that between 60 and 72,000 angels stood ready to intervene, each one of them prepared to unleash divine judgment upon the earth. If Jesus had spoken even one word, if he had called for help, it would have been over. The hills of Golgotha would have witnessed a massacre so vast and final that the story of humanity would have ended right then and there. Heaven would have descended with all its might, and the planet would have been plunged into an absolute silence. The kind of silence that follows irreparable catastrophe, a silence that speaks of something eternal having been altered. Humanity, as we know it, would have ceased to exist. The sacrifice of Jesus would never have occurred, and with it, the hope of redemption would have been obliterated. And yet in the midst of this apocalyptic moment, Jesus made a decision that defies all human logic. Instead of calling for justice, he chose forgiveness. Instead of unleashing God's wrath upon those who tortured him, he opted for the path of love and compassion. Can you imagine it? There he was, hanging on a cross, bleeding, exhausted, abandoned by nearly all his followers. He had the power to stop it all with a single thought, yet he chose not to. Jesus understood that his sacrifice was necessary. He knew that if he gave in to the temptation to save himself, humanity would lose its only chance at reconciliation with God. His decision didn't just change history, it altered the destiny of every person who has ever lived and who will ever live. It was the ultimate act of love. A love we can never fully comprehend, but that transforms us nonetheless. Think about the strength it takes to do what Jesus did. As humans, we often struggle to forgive even the smallest offenses. A hurtful comment, a minor betrayal, these are enough to weigh on us for years. Yet in his darkest moment, Jesus chose forgiveness for those who were crucifying him. He didn't just forgive them, he prayed for them, saying, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." This act of mercy was not just a gesture, it was a radical shift in humanity's narrative. In a single moment, Jesus demonstrated that love and sacrifice hold far more power than anger and vengeance. His choice left an eternal mark, not only on history, but on the hearts of all who have come to know his story. Let's return to that critical moment. Imagine it happening in real time. The earth trembled, the sky darkened, and the angels waited with bated breath. Every second that passed was an opportunity for Jesus to summon his heavenly legions. If you had been there, what would you have felt? Would you have pleaded for Jesus to use his power to save himself? Or would you have understood the magnitude of his sacrifice? Jesus chose the harder path, the one few would have taken. Instead of using his power to destroy, he used it to save. And in that act, he made it clear that true love always involves sacrifice. Humanity hung by a thread, but that thread was held by the unshakable strength of divine grace. The sacrifice of Jesus on the cross was not just a historical event. It was a moment that redefined what it means to love. In a world filled with hatred, vengeance, and division, Jesus showed us that love can overcome even the greatest injustices. His choice didn't just change history, it continues to change lives to this very day. It's impossible to hear this story without reflecting on its personal implications. What does this sacrifice mean to you? What would you have done if you were in his place? These questions are not just about looking at the past, but about considering how we live our lives today. Every time we face a difficult decision, we can remember the example of Jesus. He had all the power of the universe at his disposal, but he chose humility, he chose forgiveness, he chose love. And in that choice, he gave us a hope that will never fade. Jesus' sacrifice teaches us that true strength is found not in domination, but in surrender. It reminds us that the most profound victories are those won through love and grace. His decision to remain on the cross, to endure unimaginable suffering for the sake of humanity, was a testament to the depth of his love for us. The story of the crucifixion is not just about pain and death. It's about redemption and new beginnings. It's about a Savior who saw the potential for good in humanity, even in its darkest hour. It's about a God who chose to reconcile with his creation, offering them a path back to him. Do you believe this could have really happened? If this story has touched your heart, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reflections in the comments, and if this message has inspired you, pass it on to someone who needs to remember the transformative power of love and forgiveness. Jesus' story is still alive, and its impact is more relevant than ever. Subscribe to my channel for more content that strengthens your faith and brings you closer to God. Activate the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. May the Lord bless and guide you always.